Okay, let's turn our attention to number five, Bacon's Rebellion, and how it played into Virginia's development, and how did it shape future America, in its colonial beginnings. The theme is conflict between the colonists. It's a little bit more than that, but in another word, for us to fully understand Bacon's Rebellion, we have to know a little bit about labor, um, and we have to look at the background. Of course, let's turn back to tobacco cultivation. A lot of agriculture, especially tobacco cultivation, breaking the land, doing all this work was labor intensive, so you needed a labor source. When Jamestown was originally established, that labor source was in the form of indentured servants. Indentured servants were people who lived in Europe and who had no money, no means of making any uh, great life for themselves, and so they looked to this new world, these new opportunities, new things, new ways that they could make a life for themselves. And these people were usually lower class or lower middle class. That was their social status. And in the beginning, a lot were white people coming from Europe, England, Great Britain, and what they would do is sell themselves into labor for 4 to 7 years, and they wanted to escape poverty. That was the rationale for this. And then, if they indentured themselves, they would get transportation to the New World. And this system called the headright system, the ships would bring over these people, and whatever master back in the New World that needed these indentured servants to work on their land, if they paid for the transportation of the servants, they would get 50 acres of land in Virginia. And so when they got the 50 acres of land, they would get these servants and put them to work, breaking the land, growing tobacco, participating in agriculture, in the economy that established itself there in Jamestown and in Virginia. And upon release, these indentured servants would get tools, they would get land, and they would get money. And then they too could work those fields and make a life for themselves. And usually the term of service was 4 to 7 years. So indentured servants, or the indentured servitude, was a short span, 4 to 7 years. Now, a lot of there were some in the beginning indentured servants that were black, that were brought over from Africa by force and were put into indentured servitude. Indentured servitude played a key role in the growth of the tobacco plantation system in Virginia, and they were the chief source of agricultural labor in colonies before 1675. And planters in Virginia used this headright system to encourage the importation of indentured servants. And the number of slaves are going to dramatically increase in the last quarter of the 17th century. So, that's the background to Bacon's Rebellion. So, how does this play into Bacon's Rebellion? Bacon's Rebellion, as we saw, here's Nathaniel Bacon, is where Nathaniel Bacon, really a wealthy landowner, actually joins with some frontier farmers that used to be indentured servants that were not so wealthy. And let's look at this little series of events, or cause and effect chart here, and let's see what Bacon's Rebellion was about. What was it about? If we had an essential question here, it would be, what was Bacon's Rebellion about? So let's look at this first thing here. There was a decrease in demand for tobacco. So if we went back to our tobacco chart and saw a dip in that tobacco chart, we would see that there was a short spike downward, so demand in Europe for tobacco had decreased. There was an economic downturn, a brief recession. So as a result, there's going to be a lack of land availability to small farmers. And then the governor of Virginia, his name was William Berkeley, he refused to have an aggressive policy toward Native Americans like Powhatan and other tribes. And why did he refuse to have that aggressive policy? Okay, so let's look at Berkeley here. Berkeley was the governor of Virginia, but he was also involved in the fur trade with the Native Americans. So he had to have friendly relationships with the Native Americans to get furs from them and then sell back to Europe. So he refused to have hostile actions against the Native Americans in order to get land. He was a wealthy tidewater gentry, a landowner on the tidewater eastern coast on navigable waters, as well as other wealthy tidewater gentry, large farmers, and they supported Governor William Berkeley's policy because they were involved in the fur trade also. Nathaniel Bacon was the leader of a different class. He was the leader of a landless, former indentured servants, and small yeoman farmers who farmed out on the frontier. They wanted more land, and the reason why is they were frustrated with falling tobacco prices that we mentioned up here. They were frustrated with rising taxes within Virginia. They were frustrated with decreased opportunities to buy fertile land that were on the navigable rivers. And so Nathaniel Bacon and these yeoman frontier farmers are going to arm themselves and have a rebellion against this wealthy tidewater large farmers on these navigable rivers and the governor. And they're going to arm themselves in rebellion, and they're going to pursue an aggressive policy toward Native Americans with the end result of getting more land for themselves within the frontier. And eventually they're going to burn down Jamestown. In the end, Nathaniel Bacon is going to die of dysentery, and then the governor is going to end the conflict in Virginia, known as Bacon's Rebellion. What's important to understand is that Bacon's Rebellion had a huge impact on the development of the future United States. So let's look at that impact. What was the impact of Bacon's Rebellion on Virginia and the future United States? First of all, we see here that it reveals and indicates three things. Okay, number one, that there was class conflict within the colonies. Bacon's Rebellion exposed tensions between the wealthy tidewater planters and poor former indentured frontier farmers. In other words, there was tensions between the wealthy and the not so wealthy. The other thing it reveals is that land was a source of conflict between Native Americans and the colonists. Conflict with Native Americans and European colonists. Another thing it indicates is westward expansion of the colonies. The rebellion indicates that the pressure on colonists, there was pressure on colonists to expand the colonies westward into the frontier of the continent. But what was the biggest impact? The biggest impact was that of slavery. The rebellion persuaded the wealthy planters to replace the troublesome indentured servants with slaves imported from Africa. So Bacon's Rebellion is going to show all these things, this impact of Bacon's Rebellion. What's the theme here? The theme is westward expansion or migration of the colonists into the frontier by frontier farmers looking for land, and that's going to cause a conflict between themselves and Native Americans, and between the wealthy and the not so wealthy, and even between the not so wealthy and the government, the Governor William Berkeley. Colonial conflict with the royal government, class tensions. So that was the impact of Bacon's Rebellion. So we answer this question, how did Bacon's Rebellion play into the development of Virginia? And so we cover this other theme, conflict between the colonists.